My name is Olivia Hayes and I just turned 29. If you had met me a year ago, you would have thought I was just an ordinary woman living a quiet life. And perhaps you would be right. I wasn't loud, nor did I seek attention. The only thing I longed for was peace, a small home where I could be myself without having to prove my worth to anyone. My husband Ethan and I had just bought a two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. The house was painted a soft gray with white shutters, a small porch in the front just big enough for two wooden chairs. Behind it stretched a patch of grass where we dreamed of planting a row of apple trees one day. The house cost $380,000, the biggest purchase we had ever dared to make. Every dollar saved for it came from years of exhausting work. Ethan is a structural engineer, steady, reliable, and responsible. I run a small event planning service from home. The income isn't high, but it's stable. We're not wealthy, but it's enough to live without bowing our heads to ask for help. To me, that house was more than wood bricks or shingles. It was the symbol of a new beginning. Because at that moment I was 8 months pregnant. Just a few more weeks and I would welcome my first child. The pregnancy made my legs heavy, my back ache constantly, and my nights restless. But every time I placed my hand on my belly and felt those tiny kicks inside, everything became worth it. Ethan was the only safe harbor I had ever known. He never yelled, never dismissed my feelings. When I cried, he held me quietly. When I had no words, he sat patiently by my side. For the first time in my life, I knew what emotional safety felt like. Because in my family, that word never existed. I was the eldest of 3 children, yet throughout my childhood I never felt I truly belonged. My mother, Helen, was always impeccably dressed, her blonde hair curled, pearl earrings sparkling even on a trip to the grocery store. My father, Charles, was a strict accountant who worshipped silence and discipline. And then there was Lily, my younger sister by 7 years, the golden child they cherished like treasure. Where I was only a shadow, Lily was the radiant light. When I earned a college scholarship, no one mentioned it. But when Lily sketched a rough drawing, my mother framed it in the living room. When I launched my small business, my father asked, "Why don't you get a real job like others?" But when Lily dropped out of college after just 1 year, they comforted her, saying, "She just needs time to explore herself." I was forgotten in my own family. My birthdays were ignored year after year, while Lily's were celebrated grandly with cakes, candles, and gifts piled high. I learned to smile, to pretend it didn't hurt. I became a master of hiding emotions, all in the hope that one day they would finally see me, finally love me. Yet when I told them I was pregnant, my mother only raised an eyebrow and said coldly, "Are you sure about that? You can barely take care of yourself." Her words cut like knives, but I swallowed them down. I thought I had grown used to it, yet deep inside I still hoped. Hoped that one day they would acknowledge my efforts, see me as part of the family, not the unwanted one. Perhaps that was why, when I received the ivory envelope with carefully written letters, "You are cordially invited, Olivia Hayes and husband, to celebrate the 2nd wedding anniversary of Lily and Adam," I didn't throw it away as I should have. I held it for a long time, tracing my finger over each letter, torn between ripping it apart and keeping it. Ethan walked into the kitchen and saw me sitting there, lost with the envelope. He placed his hand gently on my shoulder and asked softly, "Do you want to go?" I stayed silent. Part of me wanted to cut ties completely. But the other part, the daughter still craving recognition, whispered, "Maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time they'll look at me differently." I murmured, "I think I need to go." Ethan didn't argue. He simply smiled gently. "If you want to go, we'll go. But remember, the moment something feels wrong, we leave. No explanations needed." I nodded. Little did I know that the decision to accept that invitation would lead me into a nightmare. A night where I would stand trembling by the poolside, 8 months pregnant, carrying wounds not only on my body but also in my heart. The day of the anniversary came faster than I expected. Standing before the mirror, I took a deep breath to steady myself. My swollen belly made every step heavy, but I carefully chose a light blue dress. Soft, simple, and comfortable. I tied my hair back neatly, pearl-like earrings catching the light. Ethan looked at me for a long moment, then gently squeezed my hand. "You look beautiful. Remember, tonight we don't need to prove anything." We drove about 40 minutes to the Grand Maple Hotel, where Lily and Adam held the celebration. As our car turned into the driveway, strings of lights wrapped around the trees illuminated the night, making me feel like I was stepping into another world. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Music from a live jazz band floated through the air, mingling with the laughter of guests in sparkling evening gowns. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered to my child, "We're about to step into their territory." At the reception desk, a young woman with a clipboard barely looked up, then said curtly, "Table 17 at the far end of the garden." I froze for a moment. The far garden? I glanced around. All the main tables near the stage were draped in white silk, decorated with elegant purple orchids. I swallowed hard, gripping Ethan's hand, and together we walked down the stone path toward the back. When we arrived, my heart sank. Table 17 was placed right next to the wooden fence, so far from the stage that I could barely hear the announcer's voice. The tablecloth was wrinkled, the flowers wilted, and the chairs were plain plastic instead of velvet covered wood like the other tables. A few strangers were already seated there, staring at me with strange looks, without a single greeting. Ethan pulled out a chair for me and whispered, "It's obvious they want to push us aside." I forced a smile, resting my hands on my belly to remind myself to stay calm. Just a few hours, then we'd go home. From afar, I saw my mother, Helen, in a gold shimmering dress, holding a glass of wine with her usual proud posture. My father, Charles, stood beside her, his face cold as always. And Lily, the star of the night, appeared dazzling in a crimson sequin gown, her radiant smile surrounded by guests as if she were a queen. Not a single glance was cast my way. A moment later, the host invited everyone to raise their glasses in a toast. As all eyes turned to the stage, I overheard whispers from the table next to us. "They still invited the older sister? I thought Olivia never shows up. Probably just to avoid gossip." The blood in my veins heated, but I held back. Ethan placed his hand gently on mine, his eyes steady and reassuring. Just as I tried to stay calm, a familiar voice came from behind me. "Oh, Olivia. I almost didn't recognize you in such a simple dress." I turned around. It was Helen. Her eyes were cold, her lips curled into a forced smile. I quietly replied, "Hello, Mom." Helen looked down at my belly and smirked. "You look heavy. I hope that baby doesn't wear you out before Lily's party is over." Before I could say anything, she turned away, the sharp clack of her high heels echoing on the stone floor. Ethan gently squeezed my shoulder. "Don't let it get to you. They're just trying to provoke you." I nodded slightly, though my heart felt bitter. The party continued with applause and speeches praising Lily and Adam. Meanwhile, our table was ignored. No wine, no dessert. When Ethan went to the counter to ask for some water for me, the staff shook their head, saying table 17 wasn't on the special service list. I froze. It was clear they had arranged everything to remind me that I didn't belong there. When the music started for Lily and Adam's first dance, it felt like the whole garden lit up, except for my corner left in the shadows. I looked up, saw Lily spinning under the golden lights, and her eyes flicked toward me. Just 1 second, but enough for me to recognize the contempt there, with not a trace of sisterhood. I turned away, fighting back the tears. A strange, uneasy feeling stirred inside me. Tonight would not end with me just being shoved into a dark corner. I never imagined that only a few hours later, things would spiral far beyond anything I could have expected. Music still played loudly, laughter and toasts filling the air, but inside me was only emptiness. When Ethan returned with a glass of water, I was about to smile to reassure him when a shadow loomed over our table. I looked up. Helen, my mother, stood there with Charles. Both of them looked as though they had picked the perfect moment to strike. Helen placed her wine glass on the table, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "Olivia, we need to talk." I clenched my fists under the table. Ethan sat beside me, giving me a small nod, signaling me to stay calm. Helen glanced around, then leaned closer. "Tonight's party went over budget. Fresh flowers, the band, some extra decorations, it all adds up. We need someone to share the burden." Charles cut in, blunt and cold. "About $10,000. Right now." My heart nearly stopped. I repeated, not believing what I heard. 10,000? Right now. Helen forced a smile. "You're the eldest sister. You should support Lily. She has brought honor to this family. This is an important occasion and it cannot lack perfection." I felt Ethan tense beside me. He was about to speak, but I raised my hand to stop him. I looked straight into their eyes. "I won't agree. We just bought a house, we're preparing for the baby. No one told me about this beforehand. The air froze. Charles's jaw tightened as he growled. Always thinking of yourself. The family needs you and you're selfish. Helen dropped her calm facade. She raised her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Olivia, you're embarrassing the whole family in front of our guests. Curious stares turned toward us. My face burned hot, but my voice trembled with anger as I said, I've done nothing wrong. I'm only protecting what my husband and I have built. Shrill laughter rang out. Lily appeared, still holding a glass of champagne, her lips painted bright red. She glanced at my belly and sneered. Oh please, are you playing the victim again? What have you ever had in life besides that belly? I was speechless. Ethan stood up, his voice low. Lily, you should respect your sister. But Lily ignored him, stepping closer to me, lowering her voice just enough for everyone nearby to hear. Do you think anyone cares that you're pregnant? Don't fool yourself into thinking this big belly is a ticket to attention. I trembled with anger. I placed my hand on my belly not out of shame but to protect the baby kicking inside me. Helen crossed her arms, adding fuel to the fire. You should know better. Family means sacrifice. If you can't even spare 10,000, what kind of person are you? Charles nodded, eyes gleaming with contempt. People will think we raised an ungrateful daughter. My breathing quickened, my heart pounding. Ethan placed his hand on my shoulder, but I brushed it aside. This time I couldn't stay silent. I stared at Helen, then turned to Lily. For years, you've never treated me as family. When I succeeded, you were silent. When I failed, you mocked me. And now, as I'm about to become a mother, you still treat me like a burden. But let me be clear. I will not give a single dime to this party. My voice rang out, no microphone needed, making several guests nearby turn their heads. Lily let out a cold laugh, hatred flashing in her eyes. You always make excuses. Always painting yourself as the victim. Pathetic. Helen shook her head, her voice dramatic. Truly shameful. A daughter who doesn't sacrifice for her family will never be respected. Her words cut deep like blades. But this time I didn't shed a tear. I lifted my head and spoke each word clearly. Family is not a place where one person is drained so that others can shine. The table fell silent. Under the golden lights, I saw Helen's eyes twitch. Charles clenched his jaw tight. And Lily, she bit her lip, stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Ethan moved to stand in front of me, but I could feel it clearly. The tension was far from over. And my instincts warned me, this was only the beginning. As soon as I finished speaking, the air around us exploded. Some guests began whispering, others glanced at us with confused looks. It was clear this argument had gone far beyond a little family matter. Lily bit her lip, her face flushed red, then suddenly let out a dry laugh. Then why are you even here? If you're not going to contribute, you might as well leave. I gripped the edge of the chair tightly, trying to steady myself. Ethan was about to pull me up so we could leave, but Lily suddenly lunged forward. Her nails, painted bright red, pointed straight at my belly. You're using this pregnancy as a shield to get pity. But sorry, Olivia, nobody cares. Then she shoved my shoulder hard. I stumbled, barely catching myself on the table. Ethan shouted, Lily, stop right now. But before I could react, Helen stepped forward, her face hard as steel. I hadn't even taken a step back when her whole body crashed into me. A powerful force slammed directly into my chest. I screamed, my body losing balance. Behind me was the hotel's decorative pool, its surface glittering under the lights. In that split second, I only saw my mother's cold eyes. Then I plunged into the freezing water. Screams erupted around me. I sank, my maternity dress ballooning and tangling my legs, water flooding my ears and nose. I flailed in panic, arms clutching my belly. Oh no. My baby. In the midst of despair, I felt a strong grip seize my arm. It was Ethan. He dove in fully clothed, wrapping his arms tightly around me, holding my head above the surface. Olivia, I'm here. Hold on to me. His voice panicked but firm. He pulled me toward the edge. As soon as my body hit the cold stone pavement, a sharp pain tore through my lower belly. I gasped, and a warm gush spread beneath my dress. My face went pale. Ethan, I'm in labor. He cried out in alarm. Call an ambulance. Someone call the police and paramedics right now. A group of guests rushed in to help, some with towels, others fumbling with their phones. Chaos erupted. Helen still stood there, her face drained of color, muttering, "She slipped. I didn't do anything." But her words were quickly drowned out by furious shouts. "I saw you push her." And Lily shoved her shoulder before that. A hotel staff member ran over, breathless. There are surveillance cameras covering the entire pool area. Everything was recorded. Helen staggered, her eyes wide. Charles stepped forward, his voice trembling. "This is just a misunderstanding." At that moment, sirens wailed and flashing red and blue lights lit up the garden. Police and paramedics rushed in. A tall officer stepped forward, his voice commanding. "Everyone step back, clear the space." Ethan held me tightly and shouted, "She's 8 months pregnant. She was pushed into the pool. Her water broke. She needs to get to the hospital now." The medics immediately checked me. One pressed a stethoscope to my belly, nodding to a colleague. "The baby's heartbeat is stable, but labor has started. We need to transport her right away." While they prepared the stretcher, the officer looked around, his voice stern. "Who caused this?" Ethan didn't hesitate, pointing directly. "It was her, Helen." And Lily shoved my wife first. Charles just stood there and did nothing. Several guests nodded in agreement. The hotel staff added, "The cameras captured everything." The officer frowned and signaled to his team. In moments, Helen, Charles, and Lily were all handcuffed. Helen screamed, "You can't do this to me. She's my daughter." But the officer replied coldly, "And because she's your daughter, your crime is even heavier. Assaulting a pregnant woman, endangering an unborn child, and public violence. You will answer to the court." Lily sobbed uncontrollably while Charles struggled uselessly. The once cheering crowd of guests now stood silent, their eyes filled with disgust at my family. I was lifted onto a stretcher, Ethan running alongside me, gripping my hand tightly. Through the wail of the ambulance in the dark night, I glanced back one last time. My mother, father, and sister, 3 people who once stood so proudly, were now being escorted into police cars, their faces twisted with fear. Tears welled in my eyes, not from pain but from a strange sense of release. They had finally been exposed and justice was closing in. But at the same time, the pain of labor crashed down, contractions ripping through me, forcing me to gasp for breath. Ethan leaned down, his forehead pressed to mine, whispering, "You'll be okay. Our baby will be too. I won't leave you, Olivia." And so, with sirens blaring, the ambulance sped through the night, carrying me, a mother teetering on the edge of life and death, along with the faith that this time I was not alone. The siren echoed through the darkness, red and blue lights flashing across the windows. I lay on the stretcher, my body trembling, my breath ragged. The contractions grew stronger, forcing me to clutch Ethan's hand like it was the only anchor keeping me from sinking. A nurse kept checking the baby's heartbeat on the monitor. "The baby's heart rate is stable, but labor is progressing quickly. We need to reach the hospital within 10 minutes. I tried to breathe, but tears streamed down my face. Not only from the pain, but from the fear of losing my child, of losing everything right after facing the rawest betrayal from my own blood. Ethan sat close, his hand shaking but his voice steady. "Listen to me, Olivia. You're doing so well. Breathe in, breathe out with me. I'm here." Together, we counted each breath until the ambulance swerved into St. Mary's Hospital. The doors burst open and I was rushed straight into the maternity ward. Bright lights flooded my vision, doctors' footsteps echoed on the tiles, and sharp commands rang out. Blood pressure rising. "Prep the delivery room. Call the attending OB right now." In a moment I saw a familiar face. Dr. Laura Bennett, the obstetrician who had monitored my pregnancy from the beginning. She took my hand, her voice firm. "Olivia, I'm here. The baby is 36 weeks, still within the safe range. We'll do everything to keep both of you safe. Trust me." I nodded weakly, sweat soaking my forehead. Ethan kissed my hand, his eyes locked on me without wavering for even a second. Time blurred. There was nothing but the crushing contractions and the doctors and nurses guiding me to push. I screamed, my whole body straining as if being torn apart. Ethan whispered constantly in my ear, "You're strong. You've survived worse than this. You can do it." And then, after a final cry that tore the pain from my chest, I heard the sound I will never forget, the sharp, defiant wail of a newborn baby. I broke down in tears instantly. Not from agony, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing my child was safe. The doctor lifted the baby, cleaned him, wrapped him, and placed him on my chest. A tiny angel with jet black hair, pink skin, and tiny hands waving wildly. I whispered, my voice trembling, "Hello, my baby, my child." Ethan leaned down, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Our son, he's perfect, Olivia." That night at 2:12 a.m. my son was born, weighing 6 pounds and 11 ounces, stronger and healthier than I had imagined. We named him Caleb, meaning faithful heart. I had to stay in the hospital for nearly a week for monitoring because the fall caused a mild concussion and fluctuating blood pressure. But from the moment Caleb arrived, all the wounds seemed to ease. The nurses called me Mama, brought me warm blankets, snacks, and always checked in with care. After years of being belittled by my own mother, for the first time I felt valued and cared for by strangers. Ethan hardly left the room. He slept on the hard chair, holding Caleb against his chest so I could rest a little. There were nights I woke from nightmares, seeing Helen push me into the pool, seeing Lily's contemptuous eyes. But when I turned and saw father and son lying peacefully beside me, my heart calmed. Caleb fed well, slept soundly, and sometimes opened his wide eyes to look around. I touched his tiny hand and silently promised, "You will never have to beg for love the way I once did." One afternoon, Bennett walked into the room, smiling gently. "Olivia, your son is perfectly healthy. You're recovering well too. Just a few more days of observation and you can go home." I nodded, my throat tightening. Everything I had bottled up burst out in tears. But this time they were tears of happiness and relief. Ethan embraced me from behind, whispering, "We made it through. This is just the beginning, Olivia." I leaned against him, looking at Caleb in the crib, smiling faintly in his sleep. In that moment, I understood that even though my blood family had betrayed me to the core, God had given me a true family, Ethan and Caleb. They were the reason I rose after everything. I knew the nightmare wasn't over. Helen, Charles, and Lily would surely try to justify themselves, to twist everything into an accident. But I also knew this time I wasn't alone. I had evidence, witnesses, and the law. Most importantly, I had a new strength. The strength of a mother ready to fight to the end to protect her child. I smiled, squeezing Caleb's tiny hand. "My son, I was thrown to the very bottom, but you pulled me back to the surface. From now on, we will never let anyone bury us again." 2 weeks after Caleb's birth, I sat in Attorney Brian Clark's office, my baby sleeping soundly in the crib beside me. I was still tired, my wounds not fully healed, but there was a firmness in my eyes I had never seen before. Brian opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. "Olivia, we have everything we need. The hotel cameras recorded the entire moment Helen pushed you into the pool. At least 6 witnesses are ready to testify in court, and the medical records prove you went into early labor because of the fall. This case is airtight." I nodded, my voice hoarse but steady. "I don't want them to escape. Not for money, but for accountability. I want Caleb to grow up in a world where justice is real." Ethan sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly. He didn't say anything more, but his eyes were filled with trust. The trial opened at the end of the month. The courtroom was packed. Helen wore a gray dress, pearls still hanging from her neck, trying to look dignified. Charles sat rigidly next to her, while Lily kept her head down. It was the first time I had ever seen her without arrogance. Their lawyer tried to argue it was just an accident at the party, that I was overly emotional from pregnancy and misunderstood the situation. My blood ran cold listening to it. Then came the video from the cameras. The big screen showed Lily shoving my shoulder, then Helen forcefully pushing me into the pool. Screams echoed. My cries rang out. And finally, Ethan diving in to save me. The entire courtroom held its breath. One witness, an elderly guest who had been near the pool, stood up, his voice shaky but resolute. I saw it clearly. Helen pushed Olivia. Charles just stood there, didn't stop it. And Lily laughed before it happened. Then the hotel staff testified about retrieving the footage, and the hospital doctor submitted medical reports of my injuries and early labor. All the evidence tied together seamlessly, leaving no room for excuses. My lawyer, Brian, stood and said firmly, "Your Honor, this was not just violence. This was cruelty from those who should have protected Olivia. They endangered not only her life but that of an unborn child. The law must speak." I was called to the stand. My steps shook, but I refused to collapse. I recounted every detail, from receiving the invitation, being seated at the back, to the moment I was shoved into the water and giving birth in pain and fear. I didn't cry. I just spoke clearly, firmly, so the entire courtroom would hear the truth. When I returned to my seat, I caught Ethan's eyes glistening with tears. He gave me a small nod as if to say, "You did it." When it came time for the verdict, the room fell silent. The judge, an older man with silver hair, spoke in a deep voice that echoed through the courtroom. After reviewing all the evidence, witness testimonies, and medical records, this court concludes: Helen Carter is guilty of aggravated assault and endangering a pregnant woman. Sentence: 7 years in prison with no parole for the first 5 years. Charles Carter is guilty of complicity and failing to intervene in the face of dangerous conduct. Sentence: 5 years in prison. Lily Carter is guilty of incitement and severe emotional harm. Sentence: 4 years in prison. The sound of the gavel striking the bench rang out like the final punctuation mark to years of tragedy. Helen screamed, her eyes bulging. "She's my daughter. You don't understand anything." The police immediately restrained her. Charles lowered his head, his lips pressed tight. Lily broke into sobs, collapsing into her chair. Amid the chaos, I sat quietly, holding Caleb close in my arms. My baby stirred slightly, his eyes half open, gazing at me as if to affirm, "Mama did the right thing." What shocked everyone even more was that Adam, Lily's husband, never appeared during the entire trial. The judge read aloud the divorce petition Adam had submitted, along with his written statement. "I cannot remain married to a woman who laughed while her sister nearly lost her life. I want to leave this marriage." The courtroom went silent. Lily let out a sobbing wail, as if every wall of pride around her crumbled in an instant. The trial ended. As I stepped outside, the heavy wooden doors closed behind me and sunlight fell across my face. The wind blew through my messy hair, yet my heart suddenly felt lighter than ever. Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind. Caleb lay peacefully in the stroller, his tiny hand clutching my finger tightly. I knew the ones who had hurt me would pay with the law. And I, for the first time in my life, was no longer a shadow. I was Olivia, a mother and a woman who dared to stand up and claim justice for herself. 1 year has passed since the trial ended. Some nights I still dream of falling into that freezing water, but when I open my eyes, beside me are Ethan and Caleb's laughter. Those nightmares have slowly turned into motivation, reminding me that I survived, I overcame, and now I have a new life. We left the old house, filled with shadows and painful memories, and moved to a small wooden home in the suburbs of Boulder, Colorado. The house isn't big, just 2 bedrooms and a little front yard full of wild daisies, but to me it is paradise. Every morning, sunlight streams through the windows onto Caleb crawling on the rug, while Ethan smiles warmly as he waters the plants by the porch. That sight is more precious to me than all the luxury my old family used to boast about. Caleb is now 1 year old. He has Ethan's bright eyes and my dimpling smile. Every time he laughs, I realize that all the pain I endured was not in vain, because it brought me to the greatest joy of my life. We built small traditions full of warmth. Fridays are homemade pizza night, where all 3 of us knead dough together, flour flying everywhere but laughter filling the kitchen. Saturdays we take Caleb to the nearby park so he can take his first wobbly steps on the grass. And Sundays Ethan always makes pancakes with plenty of syrup while I brew hot coffee and watch father and son play. I realize that true family isn't about blood, it's about love and unconditional respect. My mother, father, and Lily never gave me that. But Ethan and Caleb filled that emptiness, piece by piece, with tenderness and sincerity. Of course, there are still nights when memories return. I remember the horrified faces of the guests as I fell into the pool, Ethan's desperate shout, and the pain when my water broke. My heart clenches at those moments. But the second I hear Caleb cry from his room, I get up and hold him in my arms. My son is living proof that I wasn't drowned, that I stepped out of the darkness with a new life. I return to event planning, but this time, I only accept clients who respect me. I no longer try to prove my worth to the world. I know I am enough, strong enough, and worthy of respect. One evening, when Caleb was asleep in his crib, I sat on the porch with a cup of hot coffee. The summer sky sparkled with stars, the breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. Ethan draped a light blanket around my shoulders and sat beside me. He whispered, "Olivia, do you realize? We've come a long way." I smiled, my eyes glistening. "I do. And for the first time I feel truly at peace." Ethan took my hand, his eyes filled with pride. "You didn't just survive, Olivia. You triumphed." I turned to look at my son sleeping soundly and my heart echoed, "Yes. I triumphed." On Caleb's first birthday, we held a small party in the yard. No grand ballroom, no glittering gowns, just a few close friends, some sweets, and a birthday cake I baked myself. Caleb wore a green dinosaur outfit, giggling as he blew out his first candle. I held him in my arms, gazing at the flickering flame, and whispered, "My son, I was once pushed to the bottom. But you gave me a reason to rise again. From now on, I promise you a true family, where love is not conditional but natural." Ethan stood beside me, his arm around my shoulder, adding softly, "And I promise to protect this family with everything I have." We looked up at the night sky, where fireworks from the distant city burst bright. Inside me, one clear truth rang: family isn't the place you were born into, it's the place that never abandons you. A year ago, I was Olivia, the woman 8 months pregnant, shoved by her own mother and sister during a lavish party. Today I am still Olivia, but stronger, having stepped out of the darkness, found justice, and written a new beginning for myself and my son. My story doesn't end in pain, it begins with rebirth. And I know that from now on, no one can ever take that light away from us again. From Olivia's story, we see a truth: not every family is a safe place. Betrayed by her own parents and sister, she endured the deepest pain but rose again, found justice, and built a new happiness with her husband and son. Even now, that message holds true. Real family is not blood but unconditional love and respect. Sometimes we must let go of the past to rewrite the future with our own strength. What do you think of Olivia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel to hear more emotional and meaningful family stories.